This is part 2 of our Lyme disease series, and today I want to talk with you about symptoms, testing, and a couple of resources for you to find out more about Lyme disease if you have it. First of all, symptoms. If you feel like you have the flu, if you have chronic headaches, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, those were some of the things that I had. Also, if you have any kind of neurological symptoms, tingling sensations down your arm or your legs. At one point during my Lyme disease progression, I felt like somebody was, like there was a feather on the end of my nose tickling me, and I kept trying to rub my nose to get rid of it until I realized it was a neurological symptom I was experiencing because of the Lyme bacteria. So those are some of the symptoms. You can also Google that. There's lots of resources to find out what is Lyme disease or what it feels like. Symptoms can vary simply because the bacteria and the infection can attack certain systems, and so some people will have more hormonal endocrine system issues while other people have neurological symptoms because more of the bacteria or the infection is in your brain. So it just depends where the bacteria reside and where they're tending to hang out that it affects those kinds of symptoms for you. It's often called the grand mimicker because Lyme disease mimics a lot of other diseases, MS being one of them, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. These are things that Lyme acts like, and so oftentimes you might get that kind of diagnosis. I believe personally that fibromyalgia is quite often undiagnosed Lyme disease. Not all of it necessarily, but quite a bit of it. I think there are people running around with fibromyalgia diagnosis, taking all kinds of pain medicines, thinking that they're stuck with that feeling their whole life. And it's better to know what you're dealing with. It's better to find out if you have Lyme disease or not. And by the way, you may or may not have noticed that you were bit by a tick. Maybe you've never even seen a tick on you. That was the case for me. I never saw one, and finally 15 years into my journey with illness and sickness, a different doctor ran a different kind of test and said, you have Lyme disease. So it just varies from person to person. Okay, let's talk about some tests that you can take to find out if you have it. This is probably one of the biggest questions I get when I'm out speaking or singing. People in my story, they go, I have a lot of those symptoms. What do I do now? Or how do I find out if I have this? Well, there are the standard Western medicine tests are the ELISA, E-L-I-S-A, and Western blot tests. Those can be somewhat helpful, but they're not super accurate. They are accurate only if you're within a certain amount of weeks after being bit by the tick. If you get beyond that window of time, those tests will come back falsely negative. I'm sure in my journey of 15 years of undiagnosed Lyme that I'd had those tests, but they just, the bacteria and the infection was not in the right season for those tests to catch it. Okay, so that's really important. They can be valuable, but they're not super reliable. The two tests I do recommend, I have two tests. One is IGeneX, and that's up on the screen for you there, IGeneX.com. They are pretty much the ones that did the first kind of comprehensive Lyme testing. The good part is I think they're pretty good tests. They're fairly reliable. Bad part, they're really expensive, and your insurance company is probably not going to cover it. Like, probably not going to cover any of it. But being sick with Lyme is so much worse than not knowing what you're dealing with and not being able to treat it. So even though it's $500 or $600 or whatever it is now, you're worth it, and you need to think about a way to get that kind of testing done. I mean, you can even do a GoFundMe or something if you need to get help with that kind of test. So that's the first one, IGeneX, and they do a co-infection test too, not just Lyme disease, but the various diseases you can get from a tick bite, and then we call those Lyme co-infections. The second test is called DNAconnections.com, and I just had my test redone actually at DNA Connections, and I have one infection left after all these other ones had come back positive. So They also have a pretty good amount of resources on their website, so you can go check that out. But those are the two tests I recommend, IGeneX and DNA Connections. One thing to note, I think, for both the IGeneX testing and the DNA Connections test, in order to get those tests, you have to have a physician that orders it. You can't just buy the test by yourself and do it at home. I think that's going to be one of the next things that takes place, is some sort of Lyme kit, at-home kit that you can do based on saliva or something like that. But I don't believe, at least right now at the making of this video, that that's out yet. So you're going to need a doctor that actually orders the test and can help you decipher the information and that kind of thing. A couple of resources for you. I want to give you two. Number one is rawlsmd.com. I just heard about this guy. Actually, I should have probably heard about him a long time ago, but lots of great resources on his website. He is an MD. He had Lyme himself, and I believe his daughter had it too. And so he is just putting out a plethora of resources, helpful tips. I just signed up for his email cascade, where he sends out emails on a regular basis about Lyme and kind of updating and giving me all that information. So if you're interested in that, go and sign up for that too, rawlsmd.com. He also has health coaching that you can get. He's more of a natural guy, so you can sign up and get health coaching related to Lyme and related to his protocols that he suggests. He has a whole herbal protocol for treatment, Lyme disease treatment. I haven't done it, so I can't vouch for it either way, but I'm always for natural remedies if that will work. If you don't have to do the whole big antibiotic, antiviral, anti-everything, awesome. For me, I think probably, I don't know, because I can't compare doing herbals with that. My route was more Western. I had a ton of antibiotics in my system, and it did work. However, my gut is a real mess, and I'm still working on that, dealing with chronic stomach pain and back pain from just dealing with the intestinal damage that a lot of that caused, I think. So Rawls MD. The second one is LymeDiseaseAssociation.org. The reason I like them, and the reason I like Dr. Rawls too, is because they both believe that Lyme can be chronic, in terms of if you have the 2-week antibiotic protocol and you're not well afterwards. Some doctors say, well, you're just having an autoimmune reaction. It's not really Lyme. It's not the disease. We can't do anything for you. You're just out of luck. Neither one of these resources believe that. There's two camps with Lyme disease. It's sort of a mess. It's very controversial, but you want to get to a doctor that's going to fight for you and that's going to believe you when you tell them that you're still having symptoms. Any doctor that doesn't listen to you while you're still having symptoms, you need to kick to the curb. Here's the piece I want to tell you about with this particular website. It's also helpful. I encourage you to check out some of their stuff on their website, but there's a doctor referral button. There's a doctor referral button. You click on that. You do have to give your name and your email, and they explain why they do that. But once you do that, then you can locate a Lyme literate physician in your area or in your state, or you can look at their different profiles and find who you want to go see for your treatment. Hope this helps you. Let me know if you have any questions. Put them in the comments below, and I'll try to make sure that I respond to those. Take care.